Hello. Well, thank you very much, Kira, and hello, everyone. Well, I have to say that little did I know when I somewhat nervously attended my first AEM at the Natural History Museum several years ago, not quite knowing what to expect, that one day I would actually be giving a presentation at an AEM myself. So that's a bit of a turn up for the books. But I'm delighted to be talking to you during this first session, the topic of which is the dissemination of information to drive a passion for plants. Now, just a little bit about me. I did a degree in botany at St Andrews University quite a long time ago now, back in the good old days when you could still actually do a botany degree, but I've never actually worked as a botanist or in any related area. And in fact, I was rather a lapsed botanist for a good many years until I opened a Twitter account in 2015, and I very quickly discovered the wonderful activity Wildflowerhour. Now, many of you will know all about Wildflowerhour, but for those of you who don't, every Sunday evening between 8 and 9 p.m, people in Britain and Ireland post photos on social media of wild and naturalised plants that they have found actually in flower during the previous week. And loads of people take part, from complete beginners and just casual observers, right through to very expert and experienced botanists. And because Wildflowerhour is so hugely popular and regularly trends on social media, it catches the attention of and engages with people who actually might not previously have paid that much attention to plants. Some Sundays in the spring and summer, there can be over 2,000 tweets during the hour of Wildflowerhour. There's absolutely no barriers to participation, as absolutely anyone can post a photo of a plant they've found, even if they don't know what it is, and they have to ask for help in identifying it. So gradually people get hooked, and week by week you can see people's interest and knowledge growing. And then there's the potential for them to get involved with all sorts of other botanical activities like recording, conservation work, joining their local botanical groups, and maybe even joining the BSBI. And as I've said, it was from being an enthusiastic participant in Wildflowerhour that my own passion for plants was reignited. Wildflowerhour has been led now for several years by Rebecca Wheeler, who is herself a BSBI member. And some of you will have seen Rebecca's absolutely fantastic presentation all about Wildflowerhour at last year's AEM. Every Sunday, without fail, Rebecca is at the helm of the Wildflowerhour Twitter account, being supportive, offering encouragement and ID help, and retweeting people's posts. And at this point, a special mention must go to Louise Marsh, who has tirelessly represented the BSBI every Sunday evening since Wildflowerhour began. And she also offers encouragement, expert help, and retweets from the BSBI Twitter account. One of Rebecca's most popular innovations for Wildflowerhour has been the weekly challenges. For example, to find members of a particular family of plants or plants growing in a specific habitat. And you can see some of the challenges here on this slide. Another of her innovations was to make available to the Wildflowerhour community some ID guides specifically designed for beginners. And a couple of years ago, she asked me if I would design these under the name of Dinky Moira. Now, why on earth Dinky Moira, you may be wondering, as at just under 5'8", I'm not really particularly dinky. Well, this all came about after Rebecca and I had quite a jovial Twitter exchange when I'd helped another Wildflowerhour participant, Penny Endersby, with an identification during Wildflowerhour. Penny said that she would like to be able to carry me in her backpack to help her with IDs, and I joked that only if only I was small and dinky enough to be able to fit into her backpack. Rebecca then remarked that it would be much more entertaining to have a Dinky Moira rather than an ID guidebook in one's botanising backpack, and so my alter ego Dinky Moira was born. And here she is, trying to look innocent, getting ready to jump into a backpack and have a good rummage around inside looking for snacks and other goodies. The first Dinky Moira guide was made in January last year, and I've completed 6 of them now, and hopefully I'll be able to do another couple next year. I'm not claiming to be an expert botanist in any way, just passing on some things that I myself find helpful in the field and that others might find helpful too. And something that Rebecca was particularly keen on was for the guides to be presented in an infographic form so that they could be shared on Wildflowerhour as images which people could see straight away without having to click through any links. The first one I made was this one you can see here, illustrating 4 species of violets. I design each of the guides on just a single A4 sized page and deal with just a few of the commonest species in a particular family or genus of plants that beginners might find a bit tricky to tell apart. And the choice of subject matter is mostly in response to the frequency with which particular plants or groups of plants are posted during Wildflowerhour, and the ones which seem to be either the most frequently misidentified or ones that people just find tricky in general. And several of them have been designed to tie in with one of Rebecca's challenges. I do try to design each guide at the time of year when the plants in question are likely to be seen, so that they're ready just as people are starting to find them. And lots of people obviously post photos of violets in the early spring. So that's why this first one I made at the end of January last year was for violets, and it compares just 4 reasonably common species: sweet, hairy, early dog and common dog. I do try and keep the guides fairly simple and accessible and include just a few ID characters and some tips and pointers. All the photographs I use are ones that I've taken myself, and I do try and choose photos which illustrate key ID characters and annotate them. For example, here with the violet flowers with things like the spur, sepals and sepal appendages. Now, to someone who knows all about plants, knowing these things will be second nature, but a total beginner might not know anything about the structure of a flower and what all the different parts are called. So it's important to remember what may be second nature to some of us might be a bit incomprehensible and perhaps off-putting to others. I think also the same also applies with the use of scientific names. And I always think it's a good idea to use common names alongside scientific ones wherever possible, if we want to increase the number of people with an interest in and knowledge of wild plants. And I would really recommend that you check out Faith Anstey's exhibit on the AEM website on how to teach plant ID to beginners, because she makes some excellent points on that. So this second one I made was in February last year and was how to tell the difference between barren and wild strawberry. And again, this was in response to people posting pictures on Wildflowerhour and getting the two of them mixed up. So I made a very simple guide highlighting the main differences between the flowers and the leaves. And this one includes one of my very favourite ID tips, that the stamen arrangement in the flowers of barren strawberry always reminds me a little bit of a crown of lamb. The next one is for buttercups. Again, just 4 common species that are likely to confound beginners: creeping, bulbous, meadow and Goldilocks. And in this one, I point out that the key things to look at are the sepals, are they spreading or reflexed? And the flower stalks, are they smooth or grooved? And I've annotated a couple of the photographs to show what is meant by spreading sepals and reflexed sepals. The fourth one I made was for the common speedwell species. Those of you who know me from Twitter will no doubt be painfully aware that I habitually compare the fruits of the field speedwells to little hairy bums. And I did manage to sneak in a cheeky reference to hairy bums over on the top left-hand side of this guide. And I even did some hand-drawn illustrations on this one. But as you can see, I'm not really a terribly gifted botanical illustrator. But I did these drawings just to illustrate the 3 different floral arrangements and put a list of the species underneath each one, because that's a very good starting point to begin to differentiate them all. The next one was for those tricky small white brassicas, and this was to tie in with one of Rebecca's challenges, the White Brassicas Challenge in March of this year. This one illustrates Danish scurvy grass, common whitlow grass, hairy and wavy bittercress, thale cress, and shepherd's purse. And this one does have a bit more text on it than some of the others, but that's partly because I went into a bit of description about how to tell hairy and wavy bittercress apart. And then the final one I made, this was at the end of April this year, and that covered the small flowered cranesbills. And I think this was quite a popular one. And again, it was to tie in with one of Rebecca's wildflower hour challenges, the small geraniums. Most of them are fairly common, but for beginners, they can be quite tricky until they get their eye in and know what to look for. I did have at least one other guide planned for this year, but then I rather unhelpfully broke my left wrist just at the end of June there. So Dinky Moira has had to, I'm fine now, but Dinky Moira had to take a bit of a sabbatical for the rest of this year. But do look out for some more guides in 2022. And if anyone has any ideas for new ones or how to improve the content or layout, then please do let me know. My contacting details are all in the people section on the AEM website. So I make all the guides as PowerPoint slides, which I then screenshot, save as PNG images, which can then be used directly in and shared directly in social media posts for Wildflower Hour. I also save them as PDF files, which can be downloaded if people want them in that format. And if you want to have a look at the guides, you can search for them on Twitter using the Dinky Moira hashtag. And I know Rebecca has actually tweeted out a thread of them this morning if you wanted to have a look at the Wildflower Hour Twitter feed. They're also in the files section of the Wildflower Hour Facebook group. And Louise has also kindly put them up on the Plant ID Getting Started page of the BSBI website. All the links are here in this slide, but if you want to have a look at them afterwards and access them, I do have an exhibit on the AEM website and all the links are in there. So this is my very small contribution to the dissemination of information to drive a passion for plants. And hopefully these guides will help people who are just setting out on their botanical journeys to become a bit more confident in their ID skills and feel a desire in them to do further learning and delve a bit deeper into the world of our wonderful wild plants. And then hopefully they in turn will enthuse and inspire others and pass their knowledge on. So thank you all very much for listening, and I do hope you enjoy the rest of today's talks and discussions. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Moira. Kira, over to you.
Thanks so much, Moira. That was brilliant. These ID guides are fantastic. And as Moira said, you know, she's a keen amateur botanist and is also a member of the BSBI Events and Communications Committee. So you can see why she's a committee member. And she's also one of the team members helping to man the desk during the New Year plant hunt. So this is where her ID skills come in handy. So we would be lost without you. So thank you so much for presenting today. Also, welcome. Please make sure you follow the Wildflower Hour team on social media. But before we let you go, we have quite a few questions to ask you.
Oh, gosh.
Everyone wants to know about you, Moira. So should we go into our first question? Louise, do you have the first question?
Yeah, a couple of people actually emailed questions in advance or sent them in via direct message on Twitter. So the first one, and actually this is one that several people have asked. Moira, can you tell us what future ID sheets you have planned? Now, some people who've asked this maybe didn't know about you breaking your wrists. So, you know, sorry if people are pushing you, but the sheets are so popular. Do you have any thoughts about what you're going to do next?
Yes, yes, I do. I've got a few ideas. We do like to keep them sort of a bit under wraps on Wildflower, but no, I'll sort of give you an idea of ones that one that I was going to do this year before I had my accident was the small yellow medics and trefoils, black medic, lesser trefoil, hop trefoil, spotted medic, those ones, because again, they're ones that people sometimes find a bit difficult to tell apart. So that was one that I had planned. So I'll probably do that one next year. I did I thought that I might do one with the white umbellifers, perhaps a little bit about how to tell things like cow parsley and hemlock apart, 'cause that's obviously quite important. Wild carrot, hogweed, just a few, not going to cover too many species, but just a few. So that was another one that I had kind of in mind.
Oh, I think those two would be really popular. Umbellifers would be a great one because, of course, that's one of those families where you really need to be a botanist because you've got the lovely edible things in there like parsley and carrot. You've also got the deadly poisonous things like hemlock and the water dropworts. And I know we get a lot of queries from foragers who've maybe not done any botany saying, oh, just tell me how to tell them apart. And you're like, be really careful, unless you are 100% sure, do not eat it. Do not nibble and think, well, it kind of smells parsley-ish. And you're like, no, don't do that. So that would be great. Yeah, medics would be great. And I noticed you've also given great info on Twitter about melalots. So maybe you could think of them at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I'll definitely consider that.
Okay. Kira, do you want to ask the next question?
Yes. So
one in the Q&A.
Yeah.
Two in the Q&A.
Two have appeared. Okay, so we'll go with the first one by Amanda. When is the Wildflower Hour podcast coming back?
Well, I'm not sure that we've got any more podcasts planned in the immediate future, so I can't really sort of give a date on that, I'm afraid. Sorry.
That's okay. And our second question we've got by Margaret is, she says she loved using your guides. Have you got any plans to cover common grasses, sedges or rushes?
Ooh, well, yes, no, that would be quite interest for Dinky Moira, I think. I could do. The thing is, I've got quite an extensive library of photographs that I use for my guides that I've taken myself, and I don't actually have a huge number of grasses, sedges and rushes that I could use. That's definitely something I could think about and bear in mind when I'm out and about botanizing and taking photographs, because the pictures that I use for my guides are all ones that I've kind of built up myself, and I do carry a little compact camera around with me so I can click away whenever I see something interesting. And I do, when I find a plant, try and not just take a picture of the flower, but take photos of other characters of the flower so that I can use them. So yes, I could definitely start building up more of a library on those ones, and think about doing a guide for that in the future. Yes, that's a good suggestion.
That would be great, Moira. In the meantime, I think, can we say, and I'm sure you would agree, that anybody who's looking for a bit of guidance on grasses, sedges and rushes, Faith Anstey has done some really good booklets.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yes, she has. Yes, I've got those books. They're excellent. Yeah,
and those are available on that Plant ID Getting Started page. Links to them are available. They're very inexpensive. So anyone who's looking for guidance to getting started with ID on grasses, sedges and rushes, or any plants, can go to that Plant ID Getting Started page. And there are some great ones there. We've also got the TEP files, which focus on about 10 common grasses and give you nice close-up photos of them and some things to look for. They're very handy for consultants. We've had them a while. And am I allowed just to give a quick plug for a publication by a different organisation, the Field Studies Council? Moira, would you agree their fold-out sheet is superb for people getting started with about 20 common grasses? It's a multi-dichotomous key, but it's really helpful. I think it is anyway. Yeah, and there's also a book, Don Price's Field Studies Council book, a guide to ID of covering the common grasses, sedges and rushes as well. That's and a final one is for anybody doing the National Plant Monitoring Scheme, or actually, even if you're not, their videos are available. They've got superb training videos. We've actually got a flash talk coming up later from Sarah Shuttleworth, the NPMS person. So she'll be pointing people to that. But they've done some really nice, actually, Don Price did their sessions on grass ID. Can I just pick up, there was a question that came in by email. You mentioned earlier about a camera, and somebody asked, So what kind of camera do you use to take your flower photos? Not the name, just what sort of flower?
Oh, right, yes. No, I always carry a little, just a little compact camera around with me, and it's got it's called a microscope function on it. And I've always got that in my bag or my pocket whenever I'm out and about. So I've always got that to take my pictures, and that takes quite good close-ups and whatever that I can then use in the guides. Yeah,
great stuff. And actually, I'm noticing in the chat, Maria and Sarah, our Ireland officer, has reminded us, of course, we've got the Irish Grassland Project. If people go on the website to Grass ID, there's a load more links there. And that we've kind of got Grass ID resources coming out of our ears at the moment, but obviously we'd love to have a Dinky Moira one as well.
Well, because, I don't know that Dinky Moira could compete with any of those, to be perfectly honest, but yes, I could try.
Well, I think it's great to have stuff for when you're absolutely getting started and you're just looking at them and thinking, God, they all look the same to me. How am I ever going to crack this? I think the key message is we've all been there. If you're just getting started and you're struggling with it, we've all been there. So we're all happy to help. And the Wildflower Hour team are great. Do take part in Wildflower Hour if you haven't already, and ask Moira for ID tips because she's full of them.
Thanks.